Welcome back, gentle listener, to another languid afternoon in history. As the shadows lengthen and the outside world fades to a gentle hum, we turn our attention to one of the ancient world's most persistent and perhaps most pleasantly peculiar first world problems. Tonight we're asking a simple question about a subtle luxury. Why did chilled wine matter so very much in ancient Rome? Settle in deeply. Find that comfortable spot and let the details of the past soothe you. Forget for a moment the convenience of the modern refrigerator. Forget the cheerful clatter of ice from the dispenser. Imagine, instead, the heavy, shimmering heat of a Mediterranean summer day. The air is thick, and every surface seems to retain the sun's persistent warmth. Now imagine you are a wealthy Roman citizen, perhaps preparing for a convivium or a grand dinner party, the most important social event of your week. Wine, of course, was essential. It was the very fluid of social life. But here's the rub. Serving wine at room temperature in August was, to put it mildly, deeply déclassé. It was a social misstep, a subtle act of barbarism that could ruin the entire evening's carefully curated atmosphere. Warm wine was often associated with the unrefined, perhaps even the uncivilized. The Roman palate demanded a contrast, a refreshing shock of coolness to cut through the heavy air and the rich, spiced food. Think of the taste, the texture. Roman wines were often quite thick, sometimes sweetened with honey, a beverage known as mulsum, and they needed to be mixed with water to make them drinkable. When warm, this mixture could become cloying, sticky, and profoundly unappetizing. It was a small tragedy, a minor but persistent annoyance that the Roman elite, dedicated to refinement and pleasure, simply could not abide. The solution wasn't merely a preference. It was a societal imperative rooted in hospitality, status, and sensory delight. To offer a guest a truly cold sip was a quiet demonstration of wealth, engineering, and attention to detail. This pursuit of the cool sip became a monumental endeavor. It was not enough to merely wish for a cold drink. One had to invent, to organize, and to mobilize vast logistical systems to make it happen. The convivium had to be perfect. The food had to be perfect. And most importantly, the wine had to be perfectly chilled. It was this constant, gentle pressure, this quiet yearning for refreshment that sparked incredible ingenuity in a world that completely lacked electricity or the modern concept of insulation. The entire social structure of the Roman dinner party revolved around a carefully managed illusion of effortless luxury. If your guests knew you'd struggled to find enough snow or that your cellar was too warm, the illusion was broken. The chill of the wine had to seem like a given, a natural extension of your home's inherent sophistication. It was about presenting an ideal environment where the harsh realities of the Mediterranean climate were magically suspended for the enjoyment of good company and philosophical debate. So the next time you hear the gentle clink of ice in your modern glass, pause for a moment to consider the lengths these ancient connoisseurs went to. They weren't just cooling a drink, they were safeguarding their status, protecting their reputation for hospitality, and chasing that brief, blissful moment of cold refreshment that broke the monotony of the heat. Their quest for that perfect, icy drop drove fascinating innovations. This pursuit of the impossible chill, this subtle need for a cold sip, is exactly what led to the forgotten inventions we'll explore next. We will soon drift into the details of the Nivale and the clever ways they managed the seemingly unmanageable. But for now, let the thought of that slow, gentle Roman afternoon and the very important, very boring problem of warm wine carry you toward rest. If the pursuit of the cool sip was the great Roman necessity, then the navale was their beautifully simple yet remarkably effective secret weapon. The word itself, nivale, simply comes from the Latin word for snow, nix or nivis, but the concept was far more intriguing than a mere snow cone. It wasn't a freezer, certainly not in the sense we understand the word. It was something far older.
We now turn our attention from the quiet, subterranean peace of the navale to the vast, necessary logistics that powered it. The snow and ice stored so carefully in the mountain pits were utterly useless until they reached the thirsty throats of Rome's citizens. This required the logistics of coolness, transporting snow and ice from the mountains, a journey that was, in its own way, a gentle, rhythmic ballet of ancient commerce. Imagine, if you will, the early hours of the day, high up in the cool, crisp mountain air. Long before the sun has begun to truly burn, the specialized teams are at work. These weren't soldiers or philosophers. They were the negotiatores nivari, or snow merchants. Their job was one of precision and speed. The precious cargo, large, dense blocks of compressed snow or chunks of ice, was carefully carved out of the storage pits. The first step in this logistical chain was the packaging. This was crucial. The snow could not simply be tossed onto a cart. It had to be protected, cocooned against the imminent warmth. Picture the specialized baskets, tightly woven wicker, often lined with thick layers of straw, fern, or wool cloth. These were the insulated containers of the ancient world. The snow was packed in firmly, sealed away from the humid, heat-trapping air. The whole package was then secured to prevent the gentle, rhythmic motion of the journey from shaking the delicate cargo loose. Now we move to the road. The journey itself had to be conducted at the slowest, most steady pace, but also with the greatest possible urgency. It's a subtle paradox, isn't it? Moving quickly, yet with a calm, unhurried precision. These ice caravans often traveled at night or in the very early dawn. Imagine the scene: the creak of wooden wheels, the soft rhythmic clip-clop of the mules or donkeys, their breath misting in the cool air before sunrise. A chain of animals, each bearing its precious, slowly melting burden, winding down the famous Roman roads. The routes were carefully chosen, often favoring shady valleys and avoiding the open, sun-scorched plains. The snow merchants were masters of local geography, knowing precisely where the roads offered the most natural cover. This journey wasn't a reckless dash. It was a measured, intentional movement designed to minimize heat exposure. There would be designated stopping points, shady taverns or roadside stations that specialized in handling the cold commodity, where a quick assessment could be made and maybe a small amount of new insulation added if necessary. This whole process was governed by the simple principle of entropy, the slow, inevitable loss of coldness. The price of the snow increased exponentially the closer it got to Rome, reflecting the mounting cost of logistics and the amount of product lost to the journey. The snow that arrived was a victory, a silent testament to the thousands of steps, the careful packing, and the cool persistence of the merchants. This entire supply chain, from the pits to the city taverns, was built on a need for a luxury that we now take for granted. It shows us how deeply the desire for a chilled drink was embedded in Roman culture. It required discipline, a vast network of laborers, and a quiet, unassuming infrastructure that stretched across the landscape. Let the soft, steady sounds of the ancient caravan, moving slowly but surely toward its destination under the light of a fading moon, lull you further into a deep, restful calm. We have followed the snow from the pit to the road. Our next step is to meet the people who made this whole cooling industry run. Having followed the snow on its long, silent journey from the mountains,
Snow in pits lined with straw and ash. This was the ultimate passive technology, relying not on power, but on the simple, elegant properties of natural materials. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a newly dug Navali pit. It is deep, often several meters into the earth, and carefully shaped like an inverted cone. The depth was crucial, as it allowed the stored material to benefit from the Earth's natural stability, sheltering it from the dramatic temperature swings of the surface air. The Roman engineers understood that the surrounding soil itself acted as the first powerful layer of insulation. But the real artistry lay in the lining. The earth walls of the pit could not simply be allowed to touch the snow, as the damp soil would conduct heat and speed up melting. Instead, the entire internal surface of the pit was meticulously lined. The material of choice was often a thick layer of common agricultural byproducts: straw, dry hay, or sometimes, interestingly, ash from wood fires. Picture the slow, careful process. Workers would gently press thick bundles of straw against the walls and floor. Straw is a superb insulator because of its structure. It traps thousands of tiny air pockets within its hollow stalks. Air, when still, is one of the best insulators nature provides. This straw lining created a thermal buffer, a soft, golden cushion separating the cold treasure from the heat of the surrounding world. The use of ash is particularly fascinating. Wood ash is an extremely fine powder. When packed tightly, it offers both excellent insulating qualities and helps absorb any trace moisture that might seep through the brick or stone lining, further minimizing the destructive effect of melting water. Imagine the light, dusty scent of dry ash mingling with the earthy smell of the straw, a subtle, comforting aroma of preservation. Once the lining was complete, the process of filling began. The dense, compressed blocks of snow and ice were lowered in and packed so tightly that virtually no air gaps remained between the pieces. This was another essential step in the art of insulation. Air movement, or convection, is the enemy of cold storage. Every effort was made to turn the pit into a single, massive inert block of frozen material. Finally, the lid. This wasn't a simple cover. It was often a heavy wooden frame topped with a thick mound of earth, sod, or thatched material. It completed the thermal seal, ensuring that the cold air, which naturally sinks, remained trapped inside, while the hot summer air was kept outside. The Navali pit, once sealed, became a quiet sentinel of cold, an underground monument to Roman ingenuity, asking only to be left undisturbed until the temperature demanded its bounty. This slow, thoughtful construction, relying entirely on the gentle power of straw and ash, provided the restful foundation for Rome's chilled pleasures. It is a calming reminder that sometimes the most effective solutions are the ones that are the most basic and the most patiently applied. Let us now leave the rugged, silent solitude of the mountain ice pits and descend into the heart of Roman domestic life. We are seeking a different kind of quiet now. The peaceful, sheltered darkness of the wine cellar, where the journey of the chilled wine reaches its tranquil end. This is the world of ambient sounds of the Roman villa, the chilled wine-cooling cellar experience. Imagine you are standing at the top of a stone staircase within a grand villa. The air upstairs is warm, heavy with the scent of spices and oil lamps being prepared for the evening feast. But as you begin your slow descent, the air changes. It becomes immediately cooler, carrying a delicate, earthy dampness that is profoundly refreshing. Take a moment to just feel that transition, the soothing physical change as you move from the hot, bright day into the cool, sheltered depths. The light down here is dim. Perhaps a single When the vessel was filled with water or wine, a small amount of that liquid would slowly seep through these minute pores and reach the external surface of the pot. It wouldn't drip noticeably, it would simply dampen the exterior surface with a fine, almost invisible film of moisture. Now picture the Roman sun, or even just the warm, dry air of the afternoon. As the air passes over the dampened surface of the pot, it encourages the molecules of the exterior moisture to evaporate. This is where the magic, the gentle cooling occurs. Evaporation is a process that requires energy, and in this case, the energy, heat, is drawn directly from the surrounding material, the clay walls and the liquid within the vessel itself. It is a small, constant exchange. The heat is stolen from the wine, carried away by the escaping water vapor, and the entire vessel cools down a few degrees below the ambient temperature. It is a slow, steady chill, not the sharp shock of ice, but a gentle, sustained refreshment. This principle, evaporative cooling, was a cornerstone of practical Roman daily life. You wouldn't find these pots deep in the cellar. You'd find them strategically placed in cool, breezy spots, perhaps hung in a shaded portico or placed near a small open window, ensuring a constant flow of air to maximize the effect. The faster the air moved and the drier the air was, the better the pot worked. This makes the clever clay pot a symbol of elegant simplicity. It required no complicated supply chain, only access to water and the knowledge of how to fire the clay correctly. It was a democratic chill, available not just to the emperor, but to the average citizen seeking respite from the oppressive summer heat. It offered a wine that was simply cool, never aggressively cold, preserving the flavor while offering a soothing counterpoint to the warm Roman climate. So let the scientific simplicity of this process quiet your mind. Imagine the thousands of tiny, unseen pores doing their constant, gentle work, stealing heat, releasing vapor, and sustaining a perfect, mild temperature. This slow, steady exchange of heat for refreshment is a wonderfully restful thought to carry with you as we continue our journey into the quiet, cool corners of ancient history. We have explored the slow, passive cooling of the earth pit and the gentle, evaporative chill of the clay pot. But what about moments when speed was required? What about those sudden, spontaneous needs for a truly cold glass of wine without waiting for the mountain snow to arrive? For this, the Romans often turned to a forgotten piece of simple chemistry, salt and water magic, a forgotten chemical trick for rapid cooling. Settle in and let us delve into the quietly fascinating world of ancient thermal science. This trick did not rely on insulation or evaporation, but on a principle we call an endothermic reaction, a process that absorbs heat from its surroundings, and the two magical, readily available ingredients were water and common saltpeter, or potassium nitrate. Imagine a specialized Roman cooling station, perhaps a stone basin or a large, sturdy wooden tub. Into this tub, water would be poured, and then large quantities of saltpeter, a white crystalline substance commonly used in other Roman trades, would be slowly stirred in. As the saltpeter crystals dissolved into the water, a subtle but highly effective reaction occurred. The molecules of saltpeter, in order to break apart and mix with the water molecules, needed energy. Where did they take this energy from? They rapidly began to absorb heat from the surrounding water itself. As the heat was drawn out of the water, the temperature of the entire solution would drop remarkably quickly.
For vessels made of metal, like silver or bronze, the insulating principle was slightly different, but equally clever. These metal containers were often designed with a specific cavity at the bottom or along the sides. When the wine was poured in, the servant would then pack this cavity with the finest crushed snow or ice from the nivale. The metal conducted the cold efficiently, and the design ensured the ice pack was perfectly sealed and insulated from the outside air, making the entire vessel itself a portable chilling unit. Think of the patience required to craft these objects. For the terracotta versions, the potter had to throw two separate, perfectly sized bowls and then carefully join them at the rim, ensuring the air pocket remained intact. The craftsmanship speaks of a dedication to comfort and refinement, a commitment to keeping the wine cool not just for a moment, but for the entire duration of a long philosophical dinner. These double-walled vessels were the final necessary link in the Roman cooling chain. The mountain pit provided the ice, the saltpeter provided the speed, and the thermos of antiquity provided the stability. It ensured that the effort put into cooling the wine was not immediately undone by the persistent Roman heat. Allow the image of this thoughtful, elegant design, the two silent walls, the captured pocket of air, to bring a sense of stability and tranquility to your mind. It is a quiet symbol of how the past solved problems with simplicity and intelligence, a peaceful thought to accompany you into a deep sleep. We have explored the physics, the logistics, and the quiet artistry of keeping wine cold. Now, let's take a moment to appreciate the sheer human drama behind all this effort, the social imperative that made a simple lukewarm sip a genuine, if gently humorous, source of Roman anxiety. This is gentle humor, the Roman solution to the dreaded lukewarm libation. Settle back and allow yourself a quiet chuckle at the small-scale worries of the past. For the Roman host, inviting guests to a convivium was an act of high-stakes social performance. Everything had to be perfect. The oil in the lamps, the quality of the olives, the wit of the conversation, and above all, the temperature of the wine. A truly lukewarm libation was not just a poor choice, it was a subtle social failing. Imagine the wealthy host, a Lucius or a Gaius, pacing anxiously in his villa before the guests arrive. He has spent fortunes building his nivale pit and employing expert snow merchants. Yet the deep, nagging fear remains. What if the wine is merely tepid? The horror! A lukewarm drink was a silent, whispered critique of the host's entire operation. It suggested negligence, poor planning, or worst of all, a lack of true dedication to the art of pleasure. The Roman solution, therefore, wasn't just technical, it was often theatrical. It involved layers of gentle exaggeration designed to preemptively assure the guests of the wine's perfect frigidity. When the wine was served, the slave or servant, who, rest assured, had been rigorously trained in the importance of the chill, would often make a small, deliberate show of the temperature. Perhaps he would place the double-walled bronze picture on the marble table with a tiny, theatrical thud, allowing the cold metal to visibly steam slightly in the warm air, a silent advertisement of its coolness. Or maybe when pouring the wine, he would hold the calyx, the drinking cup, just a moment longer than necessary, allowing the guest to fully appreciate the slight, comforting condensation on the outside of the vessel. The gentle humor lies in this elaborate choreography over such a simple comfort. For a society that conquered vast territories and built enormous aqueducts, the effort required to make a drink cold seems almost absurdly focused. But that focus, that dedication to the minor detail, is what defined their luxury.
And invigorating against the palate. Or perhaps spiced apples, gently stewed and then cooled overnight on a bed of ice, transforming them from a heavy winter dish into a light summer treat. The enjoyment of these chilled desserts was another subtle marker of status.
Only the wealthiest could afford the constant supply chain required to maintain such perishable treats. To offer a guest a chilled peach or a cup of honeyed snow was to say, without words, "My resources conquer nature," even down to the simple perfection of this sweet morsel. These cold confections were a testament to Roman ingenuity applied to pure pleasure. They saw the mountain snow not just as a means to cool wine, but as an ingredient in itself, a wonderful ephemeral component of the Roman summer diet. Let the image of that sweet, melting, cold treat, a tiny, perfect luxury thousands of years ago, bring a final, soothing sweetness to your thoughts, gently preparing you for a deep and peaceful rest. We have explored the ingenuity of Roman cooling, the science, the logistics, and the resulting sweet rewards. But underlying this entire system was a fundamental truth of the ancient world. Coolness was a luxury. This brings us to the emperor's chill. Who could afford true coolness and who could not? A gentle look at the quiet disparities defined by temperature. Settle back and allow the economics of the ancient Roman Empire to create a steady rhythm for your thoughts. The ability to possess and maintain truly chilled wine or iced desserts was an immediate, unmistakable sign of extreme wealth and power. It was the emperor's chill, but only a small sliver of Roman society could truly afford to share it. Consider the enormous undertaking we have detailed, the vast logistical chain, the negotiators Nivari, who specialized in snow transport, the deep earth Nivali pits, and the constant threat of melting that necessitated quick, expensive journeys. All these components added up to a monumental cost that was factored into every single cold sip. For the emperor or the most powerful senators, the price was of little concern. They could command their own dedicated teams, ensuring a steady, daily supply of mountain snow year-round, perhaps even maintaining multiple large-scale Nivali pits within their sprawling estates. Their tables were guaranteed to feature wine cooled below the ambient temperature, a subtle but absolute manifestation of their control over nature and resources. The coldness wasn't just a comfort, it was a non-verbal political statement. Now, contrast this with the lives of the vast majority of Romans, the artisans, the shopkeepers, and the poor who lived in the crowded, multi-storied apartment buildings known as insulae. For them, the dream of true mountain ice was entirely out of reach. Their existence was defined by the relentless, often oppressive heat of the city summer. Their cooling solutions were entirely different and much more subtle. They relied heavily on the simple, affordable methods, the clever clay pots, the unglazed terracotta vessels hung in the shade of a narrow alleyway using the gentle power of evaporation. They would seek out the natural coolness of deep wells or the shaded corners of public fountains. Their wine, while pleasantly cool on a good day, was never truly chilled. The subtle difference in temperature became a distinct social boundary. If you were a dinner guest and were served wine that was cold enough to make the condensation drip quickly down the glass, you knew you were in the house of true wealth. If the wine was merely cellar temperature, stable, refreshing, but lacking that icy edge, you were likely enjoying the generous hospitality of a respectable middle-class merchant.
Kitchen, but they lacked the vast, secure supply chain that allowed the Roman elite to keep drinking chilled wine all summer long, regardless of distance. It took until the Renaissance, when trade routes stabilized, cities grew, and wealth became more concentrated, for the infrastructure and desire to fully resurrect the systematic chilling operations that the Romans had perfected centuries earlier. Let the slow, quiet contrast between these two eras, the methodical Roman logistics versus the localized medieval struggle, create a steady, contemplative peace in your mind. The story of a cold drink is, ultimately, the story of civilization's rise and decline. We have followed the history of the cool sip, tracing its journey from mountain peaks to the emperor's table. Now for our final quiet thought, let us bring this history to life. We will explore putting it to the test, recreating a soothing, ice-free Roman cooler. A peaceful visualization designed to demonstrate the elegant simplicity of ancient cooling. Settle completely and let your body sink into the resting surface beneath you. Imagine you are no longer just listening to history, but gently participating in it, using only the simple elements available to a careful Roman citizen thousands of years ago. We are going to build a simple, effective, ice-free cooler right here in your mind's eye. Our experiment relies entirely on the principle of evaporative cooling, the clever clay we discussed earlier. You will need just 3 things: a clean, unglazed terracotta pot, a little clean water, and a light breeze. Picture the vessel first. It's a plain, earthy brown color, its surface dull and slightly rough to the touch. A deliberate choice, because roughness means pores. Run your imaginary hand over the surface. It feels dry, porous, and cool even before we begin. You pour a measure of wine or water into this vessel, leaving a little room at the top. Next, you move the pot to the ideal location. Forget the kitchen or the bright sun. You place it in the coolest, shadiest, and most slightly breezy spot you can imagine. Perhaps on the cool stone floor of a shaded portico, or near a small window where a gentle, steady air current flows. Now, the waiting begins. But this waiting is not restless. It is an act of gentle, quiet observation. As the minutes slowly drift past, a tiny amount of the liquid inside the pot begins its journey outward, seeping through those microscopic pores in the clay. The pot's exterior slowly becomes just perceptibly damp. And then, the quiet magic of physics takes over. You visualize the warm air moving slowly across the damp surface. As the air touches the moisture, it encourages the water molecules to vaporize, to turn into a gas. To do this, those molecules must steal energy, and the only energy available is the heat contained within the pot walls and the liquid inside. Focus on that transfer of heat. It is silent, continuous, and soothingly efficient. A steady, gentle extraction of warmth. You can almost feel the outside of the pot becoming just slightly colder than the air around it. It's a perfect passive exchange. The liquid sacrifices a tiny, invisible amount of itself to keep the main volume cool. This is the ultimate Roman home remedy for a lukewarm day. No need for complex logistics, no need for mountain caravans, just an understanding of how earth and air interact. It creates a drink that is perfectly, naturally cool, a temperature that settles the stomach and calms the nerves without the sharp, jarring sensation of modern ice. Let the final image be that perfect, peaceful pot, quietly performing its subtle work in the shade, providing a cool, stable temperature against the heat of the day. This simple, timeless demonstration of ingenuity